A new auto-scrolling method revealed itself not even 2 days after I had recorded the first video on avoiding marquee animation, and I felt compelled to make it clear by following up that all of these situations that have these perpetual motions and forever scrolling and all of that stuff, they all have to follow the same thought process. I do want to preface this video by saying there is going to be some animations in this video that may be triggering for some as I toggle through these sites. So just as a reminder, I do want to start off with a site that I think does an okay job of, taking consideration for all of the issues that I had mentioned in the previous video. So we're starting with a site here that is backroom.io. We scroll down, it has that scrolling sort of wavy text. But if I take a quick look, and I'm going to put my accessibility controls over here and turn on the reduce motion, it does stop. And so that immediately makes my brain feel better that this isn't moving. And, words are cut off. We're not getting the whole phrase. So again, this is obviously has a case for considering it as decorative rather than something that should be, consumed or enhance, the meaning of the site in some ways. And then if I turn this back on, it then continues on again. So again, that's kind of what we're talking about, and what I covered for the most part in the previous video was that typical horizontal scrolling. So now we're going to go into another site. Let's go over to this shermanchamber.us, and I have my reduce motion off. So if we refresh the page, the image sort of zooms in towards you a bit, and then it eventually stops and resets itself and then doesn't animate again. Okay, so the slide just changed and the image is doing the same thing. It's sort of zooming in. Okay, there we go. Now we've got it. So basically it's a slideshow that took a while to start, maybe because, let's see, if I was hovered over it, I wonder if it'll stop. We're having some contrast issues with the text that's over the slider. Yeah, okay, so it looks like that's what's happening. When I have my mouse over the slider, it does pause the slide going to the next slide, but it doesn't pause the animation itself. So there's kind of a lot going on here, and I don't think it adds something to the page. I understand the impulse to want to add animation to the page to make it feel more dynamic. But in this case, there's a lot of really subtle issues in here that I think could be mitigated by just not having all of that animation happening. But that's not why we're here at this site. So I am going to scroll down at the second animation on this site. So everything's sort of fading up and sliding in. And then we have this item here. Now, this is the site that was presented in a group for just sort of general feedback on the design. And then I noticed this is what prompted me to feel like I needed to film a part 2, because most of that video was spent on horizontal animation, and this site has a vertical animation. Now, it's a very slow animation, so it really isn't, it looks like the slider must have just moved a slide that's shorter, so it moved the page up a little bit. But it's very slow. It's not, jarring. It doesn't have any kind of like flashing or motion issues that you would typically find in something like this. And I understand the impulse here for a group like this. They want everybody who is on their list of newest members to have equal, probably like screen time, because I feel like I've handled directories before. There's a little bit of a tug and pull with who gets to be on the top. Is it alphabetical? Is it the latest members? Is it the oldest members? And so, is it random? So there's a lot of sort of discussion around, people who have lists of companies and things like that, of, who gets put where. And so I understand the want for something like this. And it does pause on hover, which is great too. But it doesn't scroll when I'm hovered over it. And so I almost wish that this was just a list that you could scroll through. I wish that it was just, a list of things, but maybe the list is really long. I can't really tell what the beginning of this list is. So if we take a look, okay, Paragon Realtors. Okay, so let's see how long it takes to go all the way around. And that'll hopefully maybe give us an indication of how many people are on this list. I'm not really sure. And so it doesn't help someone like me who likes to look through a whole list, narrow the list down, take note of all the people, be able to click on them all, keep track of where I am on the list. Okay, look, it looks like we're here. Okay, we made it. So it wasn't too long of a list, but as someone like me, I have different neurodivergent, needs that like I feel better when I can see the whole list at a glance, know how many people are there. It's just a thing that, helps me personally. And so when you have a list like this, I'm less likely to take action here. So this is really helpful in satisfying the people on the list, being able to be on the list at an equal amount of time in equal placement, but it doesn't help the person coming to the site looking at this wanting to take action. And it also doesn't help if I don't have as fine motor skills where I can scroll over and then be able to do it while it's still there. And then it complicates things. That's why I spent a little bit of time on that slider at the top, because that slider is actually moving this page up and down as well. So that complicates things too, because this pauses on hover. So if I'm trying to click on this and at the same time that I'm clicking on it, the slider moves the page up or down, I'm now on a different menu item and I'm going to a different place than what I intended. And just saw that it did it there. And so this isn't user friendly from a user perspective. And is it necessary to have all of these moving parts, or can we just make this as user friendly as possible? And so I get the instinct, but when you have something practical like this, especially with links and things that you're trying to do and having to pause it on hover and all of these things, it's just easier and better for the user if you figure out a better way to do it. Maybe some kind of filterable list or something that says, mix them up, or I don't know. There's like so many solutions that you can do for something like this. And then let's take a look at the code really quick. It does look like whatever the thing that's putting this together, some kind of module, also doesn't have these items in an unordered list. So as somebody who's using a screen reader, I can't go through this and know how many items are in the list, right? You just have to be really careful when you're adding these things. You have to make sure that they're done not only user-friendly with this scrolling thing, but accessibly with the list items not being in the correct markup. So there's a couple of issues there, and again, this is what prompted me to really want to come on here and showcase a couple of other examples that still have that same philosophy as the first video of really making an effort to make things as usable and accessible as possible, and some of the issues that arise from something like this. And, as I would expect with a site like this, reduce motion doesn't do anything for either one of these things. The slider, the fading up of the things, if we were to refresh our page, everything still sort of fades in and up, and there's still just a lot of motion going on the page. So one thing I do want to bring up with, these next couple of sites, they're not the horizontal or vertical marquee scrolling that I've focused on primarily. They are, this new trend, right, that seems to be making its way into the, popular site builders. But the other things that are sort of marquee adjacent all still apply to this overall idea of animation on the web. There's JavaScript libraries that'll handle this. I think it's like GSAP, scrolling animations. There's all kinds of there's a WordPress plugin, motion.page. I think there's BricsForge, there's add-ons that leverage that, GSAP library. All of these things make it really easy to add animation sort of unrestrained, especially given that a lot of people may be on their mobile devices and motion is going to be experienced differently depending on what device you're on, right? So if you're on a somewhat smaller desktop screen, you're going to be further away. It's going to be on the smaller side. It's not going to be that impactful. But when you're on a mobile device sort of scrolling upwards and then things are moving, that's going to be experienced very differently. So all of that needs to be taken into consideration, and all of that needs to be considered for all of these different kinds of animations. So I felt like this was a really good opportunity to expand the definition of what we're talking about when we're avoiding these trends of this animation. So instead of it just considering marquee, we're also considering splash pages and perpetual motion and these JavaScript scroll libraries. So if we head back over to our desktop, I'm going to start that other site. It's designedbywomen.org, and there's, a dozen or so items that have, I'm assuming been designed by women, that are scrolling as a way to feature them. If I refresh this page, I have my reduced motion on when I refresh the page. And so you can see that it's just a white screen with my mouse having a black circle behind it. So it's just disabling this whole top area. There was no splash screen, which is good, but am I scrolling? Do I do something? Like, I don't understand what is happening here. It is taking my preferences into account, but it's not doing so gracefully. They should just put like a static version of their perpetually, scrolling items flying around. Just put an image version of that. That's more than fine. One thing that is interesting about the site is it doesn't read my reduced motion preferences with like any kind of JavaScript library. So I think it only does it on like a page load. So if we reload the page, you'll see that splash page because I've turned my reduced motion off again. And so you have the splash page with a lot of animation, and then you have the text coming in with animation, and then you have these items just sort of flying through the screen. And then again, if we scroll, all of the text has animation that it didn't have before. So I like, and then okay, look, we scrolled down even more, and the designer of the month's name is scrolling horizontally. So, we've come full circle and revisited the marquee animation, and we're scrolling down, and now here's another horizontally scrolling thing that looks like line outlines of all the objects that we're scrolling by before. I mean, all of these things are really like clever ways to incorporate all of these things throughout the site. I love, the overall design. I think it looks like the speed may change with the amount that I scroll. All of this stuff is really cool, right? Like it's highlighting, things that have been designed by women, and, it's doing it in a really cool, fun, somewhat dynamic way. This is one of those situations where, okay, I could be convinced that some of these things are pretty integral to the message of the site, right? But when animation features so prominently on a site like this, and it's deemed to be a necessity, just add a simple button at the top. When I put my reduced motion on and we go back, refresh the page, again, we can see that things have changed to accommodate my needs for reducing motion, but it's removed all of those dynamic elements that really brought the design together. If I were, auditing the site or trying to, consult with them to help fix this site, that would be the first thing. Let's fix this reduced motion situation. And then give all users the ability to pause that motion. When you have motion that's that intense, it's going to affect more than just people with vestibular disorders or people with attention disorders. It's going to affect a larger portion of the population than, if it were just a slowly sort of scrolling marquee that somebody can ignore or scroll by or wait for, or whatever the case may be. So when something like this site has, I'm going to refresh it one more time. When you have a site like this where animation isn't just all over the site, but is so fast and so big and intense, this is where I advocate for some kind of control for the user. So another site, I'm going to close that one. We're going to move over to one that doesn't quite have as much motion, but has enough that could be bothering. So I'm going to refresh the page here. It's going to load. Now my reduced motion settings are off. Everything is just going to sort of work as intended. And this site only has animation on scroll. So that's good in that when I get to the site, I'm not immediately bombarded by a ton of animation like our previous, Designed by Women site. But there is a lot that happens on scroll. And so this is one of the libraries that I was talking about where, a lot of stuff happens on scroll. And I've seen this around, and it can be a really great use of storytelling to sort of enhance and aid in that storytelling, thing. And that's kind of what's happening here. It's like telling you this story about this thing that they're reporting on. And so if we scroll through just a little bit, we'll see that I've stopped scrolling and the animation stops, which is good. I'm never sure how these are going to work, if they're going to work right, or if it's just going to keep going after I scroll or anything like that. So it does look like it's sort of paying attention to the scroll. The library seems to be working well. I'm going to continue scrolling. I find these a little disorienting because I never know, like, am I actually scrolling? I have to like really look closely at that scroll bar. Is it still moving, right? There's like that big gap between this text that says, you know, site designs, organization, etc. And then there's like, I'm scrolling and then I'm not seeing anything move at all, but I still have to scroll to get to that next text box. I find it a little disorienting for me as somebody scrolling through the site. And then you have the article and the rest of it. And then you have another one, whereas this one has a little bit more motion. And so now we're sort of increasing what we're showing to the user. And there's a lot of animation happening and a lot moving, and we're a lot closer to it, and we're going through. So if I go back to the top of the page, and on a site like this, a back to top button would definitely be helpful because the page is so long because of these animations. So if we reduce motion, you can see it doesn't adjust anything. Let's refresh the page and see if that respects my reduce motion settings. And it looks like it doesn't. So that's a problem with the library, that I'm not going to be able to get the same thing out of this without any motion. And it could just be something as simple as replacing this animation with an image version of this animation that's happening. So it's something that could be pretty simple, that at least I'd still be getting something out of it and getting some kind of meaning from these pictures and animations without having to watch all of this motion. Because I would agree that, you know, when you have a page or a post or some kind of story that needs to be told and it's on scroll, even though it may not be the most user-friendly experience for everybody, it is, I think, generally okay as long as it doesn't go too overboard. But again, you definitely need to respect that reduced motion setting, because if I do decide that, hey, this is too much, I want to read this without all that motion, I should still be able to do that. And then our final example here is one that is a lot more subtle. It has these perpetually moving blobs in the background. I don't think it respects my reduced motion because I have my reduced motion on, it's still moving. I think if I refresh the page, it's still going to be moving. So same as the site we just looked at with the article and the JavaScript scroll library, this should be respecting my reduced motion at minimum and just give me static blobs, right? This isn't something that needs to be moving for me to get the gist of what's going on. At some point, this blob moves upwards and the text is white and the background behind it is white. And so it sort of blocks some of that bottom word. And if I scroll down a little bit, they have, more animations and more blobs and things like that sort of flying down the page as we scroll. And so those, again, if you were to have that pause button on here, that would allow this to be just this blue blob to just sort of be here the whole time, not moving, and me still be able to interact with the site without having all of these things flying around. You have this logo here that's also blinking at me. There's a lot going on that are really subtle, and so at first glance it doesn't seem like you really need to do anything about it because it's not blinking, it's not, jittering, it's not doing a whole bunch of things that are, possibly maybe causing a seizure, but it is doing a lot to pull my focus in a lot of random directions that makes it hard to focus on what the page is actually trying to tell me. So this is, another example of the type of animation that, even though it's not a marquee scrolling trend, it is a trend regarding that animation and movement and motion that seems to be popping up a lot more. If you do use animation on your site, now would be a great time to double check if you're respecting your users' preferences for reduced motion, if they toggle that setting on. It's also a great opportunity to consider if it's adding anything to the site or if it's something that you can do without. Animation for the sake of animation is definitely one of those trends to avoid. Animation should be done with incredible care and thought and consideration.